It was an unassuming morning when Thomas Williams walked into the small, family-owned diner on Main Street. His gait was slow, deliberate, each step seeming to echo through the space. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and the few patrons scattered around the diner briefly glanced up. The place was the heart of town, a familiar stop for locals, and Thomas was just another regular. Thomas was an old man, his hair silver and thinning, his back slightly hunched from the weight of years and experiences most of the townsfolk would never understand. He wore a worn-out black jacket, simple slacks, and shoes that had seen better days. But it wasn't the clothes that told his story. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet dignity with which he moved. His face, lined with years of hard work and struggles, was a portrait of resilience. He had seen much in his life, had fought for a country that didn't always appreciate his sacrifice, and still, he walked into this diner every morning like it was his place of peace. He took a seat at the counter, nodding politely to the waitress, an older woman who had been working at the diner for as long as anyone could remember. Her smile was warm as she came over to take his order. "What can I get you today, Mr. Williams?" she asked. "The usual, Betty," Thomas replied, his voice soft yet firm. She nodded, heading to the kitchen, and the quiet of the diner resumed. But for a small group of young men sitting in a booth near the back, Thomas was not just another customer. They had noticed him when he walked in, and their whispers began, low at first, but soon growing louder. "Look at that old guy," one of them said, his voice thick with mockery. "Does he even know what year it is?" Another young man, clearly the ringleader, snickered. "He's probably just here for his government check. No better place for him than this old, run-down diner." The other men laughed, their voices cruel and sharp as they eyed Thomas. But the old veteran, who had served his country in the most harrowing of wars, remained still, his eyes focused ahead, unwilling to meet the insults with any response. The next day, Thomas returned to the diner, and the same group of young men was there. They were louder today, more boisterous. They greeted Thomas's entrance with exaggerated yawns and muttered comments. "Looks like the old man's back again. He's probably waiting for his free lunch," one of them sneered. Another chimed in, "He probably fought in the war, so we could all have nice things. But look at him now. Pathetic." The ringleader, a tall man named Jacob, leaned back in his booth with a smirk. "You should tell us. Grandpa, what was it like fighting for freedom back in the day? Or were you just a token guy they shoved into the front lines to make it look good?" The others snickered. Thomas remained silent, his face a mask of patience. Betty, the waitress, shot them an angry glance, but she didn't say anything. She had seen the young men make fun of Thomas before, but she didn't know how to stop them. She wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed confrontation. Jacob, sensing that Thomas wouldn't respond, leaned over the booth and called out to him. "You fought for this country, huh? Tell us, what did you actually do? What kind of hero were you? You don't even look like you could hold a rifle." The laughter that followed was loud and cutting. It was as if they enjoyed watching the old man remain unmoved by their cruelty. But Thomas's eyes, though calm, flickered with something deeper. There was a fire there, something far older and far stronger than the petty taunts of these young men. But he said nothing. He didn't need to. For the next few days, the bullying continued. The young men would make snide remarks when Thomas entered, and whenever they could, they would mock his age, his uniform, and his stoic silence. They enjoyed the power they had over him, believing he was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past. They didn't know, and didn't care to know, the things he had seen, the battles, the bloodshed, the sacrifices. All they saw was an old man, quiet and alone. Jacob, in particular, reveled in tormenting Thomas. He felt a sick pleasure in watching the elderly veteran endure their mockery without retaliation. To him, Thomas was just an object to be belittled, someone too weak to fight back. One morning, as Thomas entered the diner, Jacob decided to take it a step further. "Hey, old man," Jacob called out loudly, standing up from his booth. "Why don't you tell us what really happened? Did you lose your spine in the war, or did you just forget how to be a man?" The other men laughed, but this time, something was different. Betty, who had been serving coffee at another table, took a step forward, ready to intervene. She had seen enough. The bullying had gone on long enough. But just as she opened her mouth to say something, Thomas finally spoke. His voice was low, but the words were sharp and carried with them a weight the young men weren't prepared for. "You want to know what happened?" he asked, his eyes locking onto Jacob's with quiet intensity. "I'll tell you." The diner fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Thomas. The young men were still, not knowing what to expect. Thomas slowly stood up, and the movement was deliberate. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, pulling out a small, worn leather case. He opened it slowly, revealing a collection of medals, his war medals. There were several, each one representing a different battle, a different chapter in his life. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the memories that flooded back. He looked at the medals for a long time before looking back at the group of men. "These," he said, his voice calm but full of conviction, "are for bravery, for fighting for my country, for seeing things that no man should ever have to see. These aren't just pieces of metal. They represent the lives I took to protect people like you. They represent the blood I shed so that you could sit here today, ungrateful and ignorant, making jokes at the expense of someone who fought to keep you safe." The young men stood frozen, unsure how to respond. The mood in the diner had shifted dramatically. What had been a casual moment of bullying had turned into something much more significant. Jacob's cocky smirk faded as he processed what Thomas was saying. "This," Thomas continued, holding up a silver star, "was earned by walking through enemy fire to save my men. This medal," he said, holding up another, "was awarded for surviving an ambush where I lost many friends. I didn't fight to be honored or to be remembered. I fought because I believed in something bigger than myself." He paused, letting the silence fill the space. "You think you know what it means to be a man, to be strong, but you'll never know the real cost of that strength until you fought for something worth more than your own pride." For a moment, there was complete silence in the diner. The young men exchanged glances, their faces pale as they slowly processed the weight of Thomas's words. Jacob, who had been the loudest, looked down at his shoes, his earlier bravado now replaced by a sense of shame. The other patrons in the diner, who had been watching the scene unfold, looked on with a new sense of respect for the old man. Thomas slowly closed the case, his face set in quiet resolve. He didn't need to say anything more. The message had been delivered. Jacob stood there, looking like a child who had been caught doing something wrong. His friends, who had been laughing just moments ago, now looked uncomfortable. The power had shifted. Thomas, the old man they had mocked, had become the one in control. After a long moment, Jacob finally muttered, "I'm sorry." His voice was low, almost unrecognizable from the cocky tone he had used earlier. The apology was sincere, but it came too late to undo the harm that had been done. Thomas didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The apology, though heartfelt, didn't erase the years of disrespect he had endured. But it was enough. It was a sign of growth, a sign that the message had landed. Betty, who had been standing off to the side, came forward. She smiled at Thomas, her eyes filled with admiration. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing them what it means to be truly strong." Thomas simply nodded, turning back to counter. He sat down, his back straight, his expression calm once again. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity and had survived, and now he had shown these young men the true meaning of strength. The next morning, the diner was a different place. The young men who had once mocked Thomas were no longer there. In their place were a group of older men who had watched the scene unfold and were now speaking in hushed tones of respect. It was clear that the incident had left a mark on the community, and for once, Thomas felt like he had earned the respect he deserved. Jacob came back a week later, but this time he approached Thomas cautiously. He didn't make eye contact right away, but when he did, it was full of humility. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jacob said, his voice softer than before. "I was wrong. I want to apologize for how I treated you." Thomas didn't say much, but he nodded, accepting the apology without needing any further explanation. In that moment, he realized that while respect could never be demanded, it could be earned in unexpected ways. The shift in power, the emotional impact of standing up for oneself, and the quiet strength it took to endure had made a difference. The events of that day left a lasting impression, not only on Jacob and his friends, but on the entire town. It wasn't just about the medals or the war stories. It was about the strength of character and the dignity that comes from living a life of purpose. It was a reminder that true power wasn't found in cruelty or arrogance, but in quiet resilience and respect for others, no matter their age, background, or appearance. Thomas had fought for a country that had often failed him, but he had never lost his sense of who he was. And in doing so, he had taught these young men a lesson they would never forget. Respect is earned, but it can also be taken back when the time comes. Justice had been served, not through force, but through the power of truth, humility, and strength. And in that moment, the old black veteran had shown them all what it truly meant to be a hero. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.